Hello, my darling, and welcome to today's story time. Today we are reading The Quest for Medusa's Head by James Baldwin. If you like what you hear, please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And now, on with our story time. The Dreadful Gorgons. With the sharp sword at his side and the bright shield upon his arm, Perseus flew bravely onward in search of the dreadful Gorgons. But he had the cap of darkness upon his head, and you could no more have seen him than you could see the wind. He flew so swiftly that it was not long until he had crossed the mighty ocean which encircles the earth, and he had come to the sunless land which lies beyond. And then he knew, from what the maidens had told him, that the lair of the Gorgons could not be far away. He heard a sound as of someone breathing heavily, and he looked around sharply to see where it came from. Among the foul weeds which grew close to the bank of a muddy river, there was something which glittered in the pale light. He flew a little nearer, but he did not dare to look straight forward, lest he should all at once meet the gaze of a Gorgon and be changed into stone. So he turned around, and he held the shining shield before him in such a way that by looking onto it, he could see objects behind him as in a mirror. Ah, what a dreadful sight it was! Half hidden among the weeds lay three monsters, fast asleep, with their golden wings folded about them. Their brazen claws were stretched out as though ready to seize their prey, and their shoulders were covered with sleeping snakes. The two largest of the Gorgons lay with their heads tucked under their wings, as birds do, to hide their heads when they go to sleep. But the third, who lay between them, slept with her face turned up towards the sky, and Perseus knew that this was Medusa. Very stealthily, he went nearer and nearer, always with his back towards the monsters, and always looking into his bright shield to see where to go. Then he drew his sharp sword, and dashing quickly downward, struck a back blow, so sure, so swift, that the head of Medusa was cut from her shoulders, and the black blood gushed like a river from her neck. Quick as thought, he thrust the terrible head into his magic pouch, and leapt again into the air, flying away with the speed of the wind. Then the two older Gorgons awoke and rose with dreadful screams, and spread their great wings and dashed after him. They could not see him, for the cap of darkness hid him from even their eyes, but they scented the blood of the head which he carried in the pouch, and like hounds in the chase, they followed him, sniffing the air. And as he flew through the clouds, he could hear their dreadful cries, and the clatter of their golden wings, and the snapping of their horrible jaws. But the magic slippers were faster than any wings, and in a little while the monsters were left far behind, and their cries were heard no more, and Perseus flew on alone. The Great Sea Beast. Perseus soon crossed the ocean and came again to the land of the west. Far below him, he could see the three maidens dancing around the golden tree, but he did not stop, for now that he had the head of Medusa safe in the pouch at his side, he must hasten home. Straight east he flew over the great sea, and after a time he came to a country where there were palm trees and pyramids and a great river flowing from the south. Here, as he looked down, a strange sight met his eyes. He saw a beautiful girl chained to a rock by the seashore, and far away there was a huge sea beast swimming towards her to devour her. Quick as thought, Perseus flew down and spoke to her, but she could not see him for the cap of darkness which he wore. His voice only frightened her. Then Perseus took off his cap and stood upon the rock, and when the girl saw him with his long hair and wonderful eyes and laughing face, she thought him the most handsome man in the world. "Oh, save me," she cried. She reached out her arms towards him. Perseus drew his sharp sword and cut the chain which held her, and then lifted her high up upon the rock. But by this time the sea creature was close at hand, lashing the water with its tail, and opening his wide jaws as though he would swallow not only Perseus and the young girl, but even the rock on which they were standing. He was a terrible fellow, and yet not half so terrible as the Gorgon. As he came roaring towards the shore, Perseus lifted the head of Medusa from his pouch and held it up. And when the beast saw the dreadful face, he stopped short and was turned to stone. And men say that that stone beast may be seen on that same spot to this day. Then Perseus slipped the Gorgon's head back into his pouch and hastened to speak to the young girl whom he had saved. She told him that her name was Andromeda, and that she was the daughter of the king in that land. She said that her mother, the queen, was very beautiful and very proud of her beauty, and every day she went down to the seashore to look at her face as it was pictured in the quiet water, and she had boasted that not even the nymphs who live in the sea were as beautiful as she. When the sea nymphs heard this, they were very angry and asked the great Poseidon, the king of the sea, to punish the queen for her pride. So Poseidon sent a sea monster to crush the king's ships and kill the cattle along the shore and break down all the fishermen's huts. The people were so much distressed that they sent at last to ask the Pythia what they should do. And the Pythia said that there was only one way to save the land from destruction, that they must give the king's daughter, Andromeda, to the monster to be devoured. The king and the queen loved their daughter very dearly, for she was their only child, and for a long time they refused to do as the Pythia had told them. But day after day, the monster laid waste to the land and threatened to destroy not only the farms, but the towns, and so they were forced in the end to give up Andromeda to save their country. This, then, was why she had been chained to the rock by the shore and left there to perish in the jaws of the beast. While Perseus was yet talking with Andromeda, the king and the queen and a great company of people came down to the shore, weeping and tearing out their hair, for they were sure that by this time the monster had devoured his prey. But when they saw her alive and well, and learned that she had been saved by the handsome young man who stood beside her, they could hardly hold themselves for joy. And Perseus was so delighted with Andromeda's beauty that he almost forgot his quest, which he was not yet finished. And when the king asked him what he should be given as a reward for saving Andromeda's life, Perseus said, "Give her to me as my wife." This pleased the king very much, and so on the 7th day Perseus and Andromeda were married, and there was a great feast in the king's palace, and everyone was merry and glad. And the two young people lived happily for some time in the land of palms and pyramids, and from the sea to the mountains. Nothing was talked about but the courage of Perseus and the beauty of Andromeda. The timely rescue. But Perseus had not forgotten about his mother, and so one fine summer day he and Andromeda sailed in a beautiful ship to his own home, for the magic slippers could not carry them both. The ship came to land at the very spot where the wooden chest had been cast so many years before, and Perseus and his bride walked through the fields towards the town. But in the time he was gone, the wicked king of the land had never ceased trying to persuade Danae to become his wife. But she would not listen to him, and the more he pleaded and threatened, the more she disliked him. At last, when he found that she could not be made to have him, he declared that he would kill her, and on this very morning he had started out, sword in hand, to take her life. So as Perseus and Andromeda came into the town, whom should they meet but his mother, fleeing to the altar of Zeus, and the king following after her, intent on killing her. Danae was so frightened that she did not see Perseus, but ran right on towards the place of safety. For it was the law of the land that not even the king should be allowed anyone harm who took refuge on the altar of Zeus. When Perseus saw the king rushing like a madman after his mother, he threw himself before him and bade him stop. But the king struck at him furiously with his sword. Perseus caught the blow on his shield, and at the same moment took the head of Medusa from his magic pouch. "I promised to bring you a present, and here it is," he cried. The king saw it, and was turned into stone, exactly where he stood, with his sword uplifted, and that terrible look of anger and passion in his face. The people of the island were glad when they learned what had happened, for no one loved the wicked king. They were glad, too, because Perseus had come home again, and had brought with him this beautiful wife, Andromeda. So after they had talked the matter over among themselves, they went to him and asked for him to be their king. But he thanked them, and said that he would rule over them for one day only, and that then he would give the kingdom to another, so that he might take his mother back to her home and her kindred in the distant Argos. On the morrow thereafter, he gave the kingdom to the kind man who had saved his mother and himself from the sea, and then he went on board his ship with Andromeda and Danae, and sailed away across the sea towards Argos. The deadly quote. When Danae's old father, the king of Argos, heard that a strange ship was coming over the sea with his daughter and her son on board, he was in great distress, for he remembered that the Pythia had foretold about his death. So without waiting to see the vessel, he left the palace in great haste and fled out of the country. "My daughter's son cannot kill me if I keep out of his way," he said. But Perseus had no wish to harm him, and he was very sad when he learned that his poor grandfather had gone away in fear, and without telling anyone where he was going. The people of Argos welcomed Danae to her old home, and they were very proud of her handsome son, and begged that he would stay in their city so that he might have time to become their king. It happened soon afterwards that the king of a certain country not far away was holding games and giving prizes to the best runners and leapers and quoit throwers, and Perseus went thither to try his strength with the other young men of the land, for if he should be able to gain a prize, his name would be known all over the world. No one in that country knew who he was, but all wondered at his noble stature and his strength and skill, and it was easy enough for him to win all of the prizes. One day, as he was showing what he could do, he threw a heavy quoit a great deal farther than any had been thrown before. It fell in the crowd of onlookers and struck a stranger who was standing there. The stranger threw up his hands and sank upon the ground, and when Perseus ran to help him, he saw that he was dead, and he saw, with horror, that this man was his grandfather, the old king of Argos. He had fled from his kingdom to save his life, and in doing so had only met his death. Perseus was overcome with grief and tried in every way to pay honor to the memory of the unhappy king. The kingdom of Argos was now rightfully his own, but he could not bear to take it after having killed his grandfather. So he was glad to exchange with another king who ruled over two rich cities not far away, called Mycenae and Tiryns. And he and Andromeda lived happily ever after in Mycenae for many years. And this, my darling, ends today's story time. As always, I hope that you have very sweet and creepy dreams. Good night.